So is the US. It filed the plan under the Biden administration, but President Trump has already pulled out of the Paris Agreement. Well, Tom Mitchell joins me now, Executive Director at the International Institute for Environment and Development, which has been keeping track of each country's climate plans. Good to have you on the programme, Tom. So we mentioned the UK, the US is among the countries who've met this deadline. Who else has met it?
Well, we have countries like New Zealand, the Marshall Islands, Uruguay, but it's clearly disappointing that there are so many countries that have missed the deadline. However, it's important to put this in context. These are plans that have to be submitted every 5 years under the Paris Agreement, with the goal that each of them is more ambitious and each of them sets a 10-year emissions target. So the plans that are being submitted now are for emissions reductions in 2035. But equally, these plans are also supposed to be the most comprehensive that countries have ever submitted, including all sectors, setting ambitious targets, and also plans for their implementation. So in some ways, it's not a surprise that deadlines have been missed, because these are complex and ambitious undertakings that require time in those countries in order to be able to secure that level of ambition required to meet the Paris Agreement.
Okay, so it sounds like you're letting off the hook there a little. I mean, at the end of the day, they are plans; they're not legally binding commitments. So, some might argue, surely that is realistic to present a plan by a certain deadline.
Yeah, I think we've seen for some time that countries do tend to miss deadlines. Our own research highlights that only in 50% of cases do countries meet their deadlines. And in this particular instance, the UN has essentially granted an extension, I think by necessity, because so many countries have missed the deadline. But now countries are expected to submit those plans by September. And that's important because that comes in advance of COP30, which is being hosted by Brazil in Belém in November. And in advance of that meeting, it's really important that countries have submitted their plans, and it gives a clear sense for those negotiators of whether or not the Paris Agreement may be on track to limit warming to well below 2 degrees and ideally to hit the 1.5 degree target.
But is surely a factor is President Trump in the White House, who's withdrawn the US from the Paris Climate Agreement anyway, and I guess that takes the wind out the sails. It takes the pressure off other countries to meet these deadlines, as it were.
Well, it's certainly not a positive signal. You know, the US is responsible for something around 13% of global greenhouse gas emissions. And so if you have one of the biggest emitters choosing to withdraw from the Paris Agreement and not honor its targets, then of course it sends a signal to many other countries who are saying, well, if they're not doing it, then why should we? But actually, I was in Brasilia 2 weeks ago speaking with the presidency of the new climate negotiations in Brazil, and they are absolutely determined to work towards ambition even without the US. And at this stage, you know, we are not seeing a whole raft of other countries withdrawing from the Paris Agreement. Now, of course, that may still happen, but the Brazilians are absolutely committed to see that level of support from other countries.
Tom Mitchell, thank you.